Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Revit Pure Live. I am your host, Nicolas Catelier. I am an architect, a BIM specialist, and the founder of the website revitpure.com. Revit Pure Live is a show where we help you become a better Revit user. And we've got a great guest for you today. But before moving on, a couple of things to talk about. First, in the chat, you can type in where you're from. Always interested to see that. And I'm pretty curious this episode. I'll try something new. I'll create a little poll asking you what is your Dynamo skill level? Because I want to know if people have experience, if they have no experience at all, beginner, expert. So I'll type in no experience, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. All right, so the poll should be up there. If you can answer the question, that would be great. Learn.revitpure.com. Since 2017, Revit Pure, we've launched 3 different courses. The first one is called Basics, if you're a beginner, or if you want to train your team, if you work in a big office looking for Revit training. We also train users from all around the world at big firms, such as Heatherwick and UN Studios. The design course, if you want to use Revit for presentation purpose, 3D views, creating finished plans, creating great looking elevations, stuff like that, that is for you. And recently we've released the managed learning package for Revit, which is aimed at intermediate to advanced users that want to become BIM managers or that just want to improve their Revit skill. If you go over there at learn.revitpure.com and you have a look, you can get the complete course overview and the complete list of chapters. And one of the free chapters about Dynamo, a frequent question I get is, how can I learn Dynamo? Well, if you go over there, the first chapter, part of the first chapter about Dynamo is free. And the chapter includes some of the nodes from today's guest that he's created. It's a must on most of my scripts. All right, that is for that. What else did I have to announce? Oh yeah, the next episode, Revit Pure Live episode 29, will be next week with Fabio Roberti and Dezio Ferreira. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. And these two gentlemen wrote the book called Increasing Autodesk Revit Productivity for BIM Projects. They're the co-author of this book. And so we'll cover many topics during this episode. We'll talk a little bit about Power BI and other tricks to increase your productivity. So it should be a good episode. It's next week, Wednesday at the same time, 3 p.m. All right. Quickly glancing at the chat to see people are from Kansas City, Virginia, US, Atlanta, Brazil, Toronto, Concord, Philadelphia. So all around the world as usual. Thanks for coming in. Today's guest is John Pierson. John is a design technology specialist at Parallax team. He is also known for being the creator of the amazing Monocle and Rhythm packages for Dynamo. He is also an Autodesk Expert Elite and has created multiple courses about Revit and Dynamo. And is based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So welcome to the show, John.
Hey, how's it going? Just want to say hi to everyone and thank you, Nicholas, for having me on.
Thanks for coming in. And I've got to say, I've already mentioned that to you, but your webcam is the best looking one I've had on all my guests so far.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's honestly, so the capture card's like a $10 capture card, but I borrowed my wife's mirrorless camera to just make the Zoom meetings look a little better mostly. And I record a lot of videos, as you mentioned, so
yeah.
A lot of it is like just trying to pick it up that little notch, so it's always fun.
Oh, well, it shows. All right, so one of the first questions I typically ask my guests is, how did you get started with BIM? In your case, how did you get started with Dynamo as well?
For sure. Yeah, so I man, it's been since It's been since 2013. I started at an architecture firm. I have a 2-year degree, so I started out as someone who should be a drafter, technically. So I started at an architecture firm that also had a structural engineering department and an interior design department, building Revit content, building families, doing training on Revit for new employees, and just general support requests. We had a whole team called the Revit support team. In 2014, naturally being a Revit user, I started hearing about automation and this thing called Dynamo. So I opened Dynamo first in 2014 to check it out, to see how it can help us at the firm, for all of our Revit users, and it scared the heck out of me. So I actually opened Dynamo. All the nodes they were yellow to start with back then. They all turned red and orange, and all sorts of errors happened. And I closed it, and I was like, I'm never going to learn this. This is impossible. So then a year later, I went to AU 2015, Autodesk University, and I attended a class from Marcelo Scambaluri called Dynamo for Dummies. And I was like, this class is for me. I'm a dummy when it comes to Dynamo. And I started using it and building workflows and Dynamo graphs, and in 2015 started bundling those as custom nodes in Rhythm as well. So once I was in his class, I saw tying parameters together, and it really made it click in my mind, like how we can start to use this thing. And from there, I mean, I worked at the architecture firm for 4 years, and then I jumped into the consultancy world. And you had Melissa Thiesens on last week, who's a coworker of mine, and yeah, jumping into the consulting world back in 2017, I think now. It was kind of interesting because now instead of being in one office, I got to see how a lot of people worked and start building tools that we're able to give to clients and things. And I have a whole thing that I can pop up to that I always share. I always call it my Dynamo journey. And I haven't updated it in a bit, obviously. But yeah, so that's kind of all of it. I started learning C# in 2017 as well. My wife actually found a coding boot camp locally. So I attended that and started building Dynamo nodes as well. And then the rest are, at that same time, I started presenting at AU and things like that. So yeah.
So it was pretty quick, the time from which you started learning before then you first published your first package, Rhythm.
Yeah,
that
so
was
I
like a year later.
It was so AU 2014 is the AU I went to. See, I already forget. So AU 2014 was in November of 2014. February of 2015 is when I published Rhythm for the first time. And that's because from November to February, I was building a bunch of workflows and nodes. And I was like, these are probably going to be helpful for other people. So I bundled those in a package and shipped them out on the Dynamo Package Manager. My first custom node I made it's still in the package. It's called the arrowhead assigner. So it actually sets type parameters of arrowheads for text elements, annotations, and things like that. That was my first custom node I made. And once again, setting parameters is what I learned at AU in Marcelo's class.
All right. So quickly glancing at the chat, somebody mentioned your sound was a little low. I've increased it to the maximum on my side. So let me know if it's still low. I think it should be okay now.
Yeah, I can raise it too.
It was not full volume, so it should be good. And answers to the poll, I guess people watching the replays cannot see it. In the chat, we have 51% beginner, 22% intermediate, 19% no experience, and 6% advanced. So, which is a good mix of folks, and I think we'll try to cover a lot for beginners. So I think we should probably start with Rhythm. And I've got to say, I use Rhythm on almost all my packages. And some of the nodes I use all the times are changed parameter by type or instance. Because can you talk about why you've created that node?
Yeah, so that one's a great example because when I was working on Dynamo graphs naturally, so one of the first questions I had on the forum as well was, how do you set a type parameter? Because in Dynamo, you select a model element, and I can kind of work through it some on my screen at the same time. You select the model element, right? So if we're in a view, this should be a review for people, but if not, this is how you pick a model element. So we'll pick a wall, we'll hover, From there, if I were to want to change the type mark of the wall, it's not clear. That path isn't very clear to users. So in the event that I look at parameters for this element, those are all the instance parameters. So if you're a Revit user, you're familiar with the fact that those are all the parameters you see right in here. So that's like one of those things that wasn't clear right away. And the way that you actually do that, to kind of finish out that thought, is you actually have to extract the type of that thing. So like element type is a node, and that would then let you dive down into the type parameters. That's the equivalent of you hitting edit type in Revit. As a beginner Dynamo user, I didn't know what element.element type meant at all,
Yeah.
So by the time I was making packages, I was like, let's fix that a little bit for people to where you can just get whatever parameter they want, type or instance. And this used to be a node that was all out of the box nodes combined, but it was very slow. So when I started learning C#, I optimized it. So it's a pretty quick node now. If you know that you want to type parameter, though, I always kind of tell people to kind of do this first. But if you're kind of interrogating a model, this is a great starter for sure.
Yeah, this one will always work. But I guess, yeah, you would use out-of-the-box nodes. So what is your stance on packages? I've seen some people say you shouldn't use any custom packages at all, or some of them say, well, you need to select like a couple of them that, are always being maintained. What do you think about that?
For sure. So generally, I support package use because Dynamo is a community. It's not just a software. It's a whole community of people wanting to help each other do awesome things. That being said, there are several difficulties introduced with the package manager in Dynamo. To be fair, those are getting better now in later versions of Dynamo. In 1.x versions back in like Revit 2017 and 18, managing packages, you have to do it yourself with like startup scripts or something like that in Windows or your computers. So I generally allow people or tell people to use packages. That being said, a package like Rhythm is fully open source. So if you're ever curious what it's doing, it's no secret. You can just go to GitHub, look at all of the source code for it, and use it as you please. It has a license that's free to use and all that kind of stuff. In addition to that, if you don't want to embed Rhythm nodes inside of your Dynamo graphs, if you're trying to reduce dependencies for some reason, a lot of the time I'll include some Python nodes as well. So not all of them, but as I make them, I'll include Python equivalents if I can. And that's just because I'm curious and I want to learn about it. So I just put it on the GitHub at the same time. But generally speaking, if you're using Dynamo, you should start to have a plan for deployment if you want to really start using it heavily. And you need to do things like manage your deployments with startup scripts at Parallax. Every time a user logs on, their packages sync locally to their roaming folder. We manage deployments for several clients in that way as well. So you need to have that in place, or at the very least have some kind of idea of how you want to share graphs. Whether that be a tool like Orchestra or something, just start to plan that out. I've seen people have success with managing their Dynamo graphs and packages like on Dropbox or OneDrive, and those sync to each machine, especially with work from home being how most people are working these days. But yeah, it's one of those things. Generative design, they bundle the packages with the workflows, so I keep hoping that happens soon with Dynamo. So I think we're starting to see some of that start to come to fruition as well. So
yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be that complicated to auto download the packages, I guess, if you have a script. I don't know. It's coding,
it's not the
so
worst thing in the world for sure. That being said, too, for packages, a lot of the time, packages like Clockwork or Archilab or Rhythm for that matter, we start to watch and see our nodes get migrated into the out-of-the-box nodes, which is pretty cool. So on GitHub for Rhythm, I have a future deprecation list, which means these nodes are going to eventually disappear from Rhythm, probably a few years from now, because I want to leave compatibility. And we monitor that as well. So things like family instance, get the room it belongs to. I've had that in Rhythm for a few years. Revit 22 now has that. So things like that are always cool to watch. So kind of keep an eye on things like this. The creator of Clockwork actually has a similar watch list for when his nodes will get migrated to.
Yeah, that's really cool. So another node I really like from Rhythm that I use a lot is the filtering nodes. Because
Yeah, for sure.
I know it's funny. I've heard a couple of people say that their favorite node. I think it's a funny question to ask. What is your favorite node? It's like asking what is your favorite color. But and many of them say a filter by bull mask, which allows you to filter. But your nodes, I use them all the time because it's a little faster and it avoids me a few nodes. It avoids me a few steps. Can you
For
show
sure.
that or explain?
Yeah, so these element filter nodes, they used to be a bunch of separate nodes originally. And I think a lot of people actually don't know about them. So they're under Rhythm, Revit, Element Filter. And you're able to start to filter things by numeric parameters as well and things like that. So there's several of them in here. And if you hover, it actually describes how it's done. So it's using a algorithm called fuzzy string matching or Levenstein distance, which I learned from the Dynamo blog. A couple people made a package called Fuzzy Dino that does string matching. So the reason it does stuff like that is because if I want people to be able to filter things, so like, let's see, go to 3D. It's always fun to do this stuff live, right? Let's do, we'll isolate all of our walls to make my life a little easier. Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll just go in and we'll pick a few walls to filter. I need something to filter, right? And then one of my favorite nodes from another package is the current selection node from Spring Nodes. So you can select things in Revit, and then this will actually load your selection. So I selected 3 walls. In this case, if I wanted to filter out all these walls by their unconnected heights greater than 3,800 millimeters, this is a metric template. And we'll do, and forgive me if I'm kind of going fast, I just want to show the node mostly. So that'll be my parameter name, my value, and my elements. And then the filter method, you can actually pick a bunch of them. So like greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. And what's cool about this is if I spell it wrong, so I'm going to put greater than, spelled pretty wrong, it'll actually figure out, and I might have to put, yeah, a higher number, but it'll actually figure out that I think you meant greater than spelt correctly. So that's what's really neat about that.
I didn't know that. So you can
string matching.
completely misspell it or create a Dynamo script
Pretty
while you're
close.
drunk and it will still work.
Yeah, there we go. We're trying to make it easier while you're working those late night hours, right? So yeah, generally try to do it right if you can, but if I accidentally did what I just did, it'll generally get pretty close. And what that does is it gets all of the possible options, so greater than, less than, and it sees how closely related they are to what you typed in. That's the thing, is the other one, set parameter by name, case insensitive, that node was born out of people typing things wrong. You know, so like anytime a user's like, the parameter will always be named asset ID with a capital ID, I kind of have a trust issue with that sometimes. So you're able to start to fix that yourself.
All right.
Yeah, these nodes are really fun.
Yeah, I've got to say that filtering, I use them all the time because you can do the same thing with an equal node and the filter by bull mask and a couple of other nodes. But I think this is a single node. It's much faster. You have all the filtering methods. So definitely a node that I would recommend for beginners. Basically, if you do a selection and you want to keep like only walls above this specific value, this is the way I would do it. Yeah, exactly. Like you're showing it the way you would do it with out of the box nodes.
And for that matter, filtering by Boolean mask is a great method to know. But sometimes like you're just wanting to get at these models really quickly. So these nodes offer that pretty quick.
Yeah. So it's 3 or 4 nodes combined in a single one. All right. So these are the rhythm nodes I use the most often. I was wondering what are your favorites or the one you're most proud of or you use the most yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, all of them. No, I'm just kidding. No, no. One of the nodes. So when I first started learning Dynamo, or when I was starting to get interested in Dynamo, I worked at the architecture firm, and we had an interior design group who always on every project. So let's see, we'll open sections. On every project that we were on, they would come into elevation views, turn on the crop region, right click, override graphics and view by element. You might love or hate this, that's up to you. We'll crank it up really high. We'll make sure it's solid. So they would come in and they would override those to give their elevations a border. So when I was helping with Revit support at that firm, people always be like, can we just make that happen faster? You know, things like that. And for years I was like, no, I don't think we can. So when I started learning Dynamo, I was just getting curious about if we can make that happen. There's a whole thread on Revit forum that I'll try to share the link to. But basically the viewport border is -1 of the element ID of the view, of the viewport, I think. So I found that out by accident. But if we do IDs of selection, I think within the view, I might have to select the actual viewport. Yeah. The actual crop region is -1 of that. So it's a weird relation that's found. So when I started making nodes that were, these are called zero touch in C#, I started to look at that. So now we're able to, and we'll add a slider. We'll go 1 to 16 because of the pin weights, right? I got the wrong view. So those errors do help you. So yeah, so now as we slide this slider, it'll actually override that viewport now for me. So if you were to feed in a sheet of elevations into this node, you can start to override those really quickly. Save that for Dynamo Player and give it all to all of your interior design people, whoever wants to frame viewports. This is version 2 because it uses that -1 strategy on the element ID. That doesn't work all the time because Revit's weird. So there's another one called version 1 that uses more complicated methods to find the viewport. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite nodes because it was like a wish list item for years at the firm I was at. And I actually didn't figure it out until I had already left the architecture firm and was already working as a consultant for a couple of years.
Did you send them back the script at least?
Yeah, I did a user group presentation and I
so,
showed it. Yeah, so I showed it at a user group and they were like, you finally got it. And I'm like, yes, finally.
All right. You mentioned the no-touch nodes. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so zero touch, it's the method for Dynamo to import DLLs. So DLLs are compiled bits of code made in C#. So this node doesn't look like a typical custom node that has that stacked look. So like if we put like a Clockwork node, that's a custom node from Clockwork. This one is imported from a DLL. So it's C# code that's interpreted as nodes. I don't know all of the background of it being called zero touch, so someone will probably correct me in the comments and that's fine. But Rhythm, generally speaking, looks like this. This is a Visual Studio. So these are all of the nodes. So if we were to go to the section view that I was just showing, that node is literally all of this code makes that happen right here. So this is all the C# code, and then this is the node name that gets turned into a zero touch node. So this is the name of it. And then the description and everything like that. So I mean, if anyone's ever interested in a create zero touch C# nodes class, let me know too, and then I'll pitch one to like AU or Built or something.
Oh, you thought that you have a class about creating zero touch
so
nodes?
Marcelo had a class on zero touch as well, and that's kind of where I picked it up once again. So when I started wanting to learn how to make zero touch nodes, because I was learning some C#, naturally I went back to who helped me learn Dynamo, right?
And is it the same? Is it similar to the way you would create an add-in using C# directly in Revit?
It's very similar. So like my path was Dynamo and then Python in Dynamo. and then zero touch nodes in C#, and then now I build Revit add-ins primarily. So one of my biggest functions of my job at Parallax is I build Revit plugins for clients, and we sell plugins as well and things like that.
Yeah, I actually had an episode with Michael Kilkelly from R Smarter, and great episode. You might want to look that back, and he taught how to create a plugin with C# from scratch. And
oh, very cool.
Yeah, and visually in Dynamo, I guess the way you can differentiate the zero touch nodes from other nodes is that they're kind of little stacks of rectangles in some of the nodes, right? Like,
yeah, so
from Clockwork are often like this, I think.
Yeah, so this stack node means that you can actually jump inside of the node and see what's going on. So in the case of this node, it's kind of simple, but a lot of times there's Python scripting embedded in there. So if we go into this node, you can kind of see what he's doing within that node. So that's a custom node, a general one. Zero touch node's a custom node as well. They're a little harder to identify. I rename Rhythm nodes as you place them on the fly with Rhythm itself, so it renames itself, it documents itself. So you wouldn't be able to tell normally, but if you right click and do help, you can actually see that it's from Rhythm right here on that little browser. And we'll get into this in a bit, you can press Control H on your keyboard. But we'll show that in a little bit.
All right. So I think I've been asking my own questions because I've got so many. But let's take a few questions from the chat. Somebody asks how much time a day you're working in Revit or Dynamo. So what do you spend most of your day doing these days?
Yeah, so these days, I've actually been spending a ton of time in generative design lately because we're working on some examples for that. So we linked a post earlier on in the chat for MEP workflows for generative design, getting ready for those. So I've been spending a ton of time in that lately. Additionally, I've been spending a lot of time bug testing and trying out the new version of Dynamo. If anyone hasn't seen it, I'll preview it real quick. It's the version that has all these dark mode nodes and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
it was definitely on the menu for today.
Yeah,
I think
and then
we'll show some of it.
I guess like my trajectory too. So when I worked at the architecture firm, when I started using Dynamo, I was really lucky in the sense of working there because they gave us 2 hours every morning for R&D, and I know not everyone can do that. Yeah. But that was a huge contributor to me learning Dynamo. And these days, it just depends on what a client's asking for. We kind of gravitate towards, if someone's coming to us like asking for a solution in Revit, we gravitate towards shipping a Revit add-in because that's more easy to manage as a consultant. So while I am an advocate for packages, I want my client to have the easiest possible use case of a workflow for Revit. So if they want to have a tool that auto sets a parameter on placing walls or something, I don't know. We'll generally try to get them an add-in first because I just ship them an installer. I don't have to ship them a Dynamo graph that works right now. It might not work in 3.0 or whatever in a few years. I have to ship the packages that come with it, which gets difficult if the package just doesn't get updated or something. So yeah, it's a lot of time I'm spending in C# or in Visual Studio. A lot of stuff's been focused on creating videos to document things. So as we build things, we got to document them. So recording videos and editing those has been fun too.
Yeah, and we've got another question from Luis that asks, should I learn Python first or Dynamo? My answer would be start with Dynamo, probably. What do you think?
I agree. So Dynamo is really great. And I heard a quote from Brian Ringley once who said, Dynamo is C# disguised as nodes. So it gives you that logic thinking very much so. So I would start with Dynamo. And in the case of like some of these nodes, you can start just placing Python scripts right on your canvas, double clicking and hacking at it to see what happens. So you can be very curious with Dynamo and kind of play with it. That's what I really like about it. So generally I would say Dynamo, encounter something that you want to do that's not in there. Like you didn't used to be able to pin things with Dynamo. and you can start to try to add that functionality as well. And what's great about Python in Dynamo is you have so many places to learn. So like if I want to know how this guy, Andreas, for the Clockwork package got the Dynamo version, I literally double click and I can start to see what all he's doing. So you're able to learn very quickly that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, what do you think about the differences between Python and C Sharp? When did you decide to make the jump? And what are the differences you saw between the two languages so far?
Yeah, so for Python in Dynamo, at least, I'm not a Python user outside of Dynamo, really. I know some, but not a lot. Generally speaking, if I were to have something in here and I start wanting to modify it or manipulate it, I need to kind of know what to do. There's no like, there are some, so I'm not going to just pretend like there aren't some helping hands, but prediction doesn't really happen as well in Python in Dynamo speaking. So like if I type Dynamo core dot, it'll suggest some stuff. So this is a autocomplete. Python's pretty good at this. I really like Python because you don't have to worry about what types of data you're dealing with. So in the event of, if people haven't realized it, everything in Dynamo has a type. So in the case of this section view, that is the internal type of it right here. That you don't have to worry about as much in Python. You can just kind of try stuff and see if it works. In C Sharp, you have to worry about that pretty heavily and cast it, it's called, to what it is. But in C Sharp, a lot of the time, if I were to start to mess with something, you'll see what the autocomplete looks like in here as well. So I hit doc dot, and here's everything I can do to a Revit document right here in this menu. These are all the Autodesk Revit internal things we can do to it. So we can get the path of the file and all this kind of stuff. And if I were to tab to this, I can keep on modifying that in C Sharp. So that's what's really cool, is it kind of prompts you to work through it. And if you install a tool called ReSharper in Visual Studio, it really helps you a lot to where it starts to help you code faster too. And it teaches you. So like, you'll get little tool tips along the way that say, hey, it'd be better if you did the code this way. And then you start to learn, which is really cool. And what's nice about C Sharp is it kind of gives you that stepping stone to plugins that you can deploy. With Python, there are things like PyRevit, which is great to ship whole toolbars of scripts. But I mean, with C Sharp, you can actually start to bundle these together as well.
All right. Interesting. So I think we should move on to Monocle. But first, is there any other nodes from Rhythm you wanted to show, or do you think we've... Well, there's so many of them, so obviously we won't have time to go through them all. But yeah, as I've mentioned, there are a lot of Dynamo beginners. Any other nodes you would suggest for beginners, perhaps from Rhythm or
for beginners
or other packages?
Yeah, so I guess what I can do is I'll suggest packages for beginners to install and look at.
Yeah, great.
Clockwork, always install that. Spring nodes is really great. Install that one all the time. What else is on here? I'm going to forget a few, so I apologize. It's no hard feelings. Data Shapes is really good for building UIs. I don't have it loaded on here, but there's another package called Bimorph or Bimorph. His package is great to do a lot of clashing type things. Generally speaking, I suggest Clockwork and Spring nodes and Archilab is the first ones because they have a lot of Python to learn from too. For Rhythm, a lot of the time, anything in the Revit bin will start to tell you what you can do in Revit that like I wanted to add. So one thing we used to get a lot are like figuring out what room something's in. Every item in Revit inherently knows what room it's in, or most items, most family instances. So I added a note for that, and that's something that was one of my first questions on the forums as well, was creating these occupancy loads and excluding furniture from it and things like that for built-in stuff. So a lot of times it's very practical things in Rhythm in that way. I don't add a whole lot of nodes anymore because there's so much now in out of
Mm-hmm.
the box. So Rhythm's just I kind of updated and bug fix, but yeah,
Yeah,
other than that,
it's funny.
okay.
I think I actually used this node for the instance room. I was trying to number the doors based on the room number, so that is a pretty good instance.
Yeah, for
Pretty
sure.
good
And
use of it.
like in the case of this node, it was originally developed once again for like furniture. So like if I select like this and plug it in, that knows what room it's in, right? So I'm able to start to group those by the room they're in and do furniture counts and things like that. Yes, you can do that in Revit schedule, but a lot of times we want to start to manipulate some of this in that way, which is kind of cool. There's also space nodes, so family instances, you can get the space there, and for the MEP people as well. These nodes also were built because one of the other tools that I offered initially with Rhythm is 3D room tags. So you have the ability to actually generate family instances with room numbers on them. So contractors really like that one as well. I think it's still in here somewhere. It's somewhere in here. I can't find it.
So 3D tag. So how is what kind of what category of element is that? It's not.
So
Is it
I
an
have it
actual
just
tag?
as a generic model.
Uh-huh.
So it's a 3D
Oh, general
generic
model.
model.
Yeah.
So we use it quite a bit at Parallax. If I go to so in the extra folder in Rhythm, there is the 3D room tag family. So you can see if I open it real quick. And it's in an old version of Revit on purpose because backward compatibility. But if I go to a 3D view, that's what you see. And that script will actually go through and place these in each room, set the name and set the number as well. So for contractors flying through Navisworks, they really like this. Um, that workflow is a little bit older because it's an old DYF of the stacked nodes. So it's due for an update actually. So we'll see. I'll get around to that eventually as well. But yeah.
Oh, cool. So it places this family in automatically in the right view in the 3D view.
Yeah. So,
That's interesting.
and like, it's still in the package. I don't know where the heck I hid it right now. So like, I think I spelled it 3D.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna find it right now. I just built a fresh package for this webinar. So
All right.
yeah.
So quick glance at the chat. Oh, the BIM Cider is there. Carl Storms. Hello, Carl.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think we should move on to Monocle. So can you tell me why you decided to create Monocle? What problem
Oh,
were you
that's
trying to solve?
for sure. So that's a really good question. So package dependencies. So like that question came up earlier. So that was when was that I started working on that? Monocle 2018, the summer of
Mm-hmm.
2018.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a BIM consultant, so I've been working at Parallax since 2018, and the question came up: how do we start to tell people which packages are used in a Dynamo graph? So in the event that I have a graph, and I have another one open just to look at it. Um, First of all, I don't know that that's from a custom package, but how do I tell people what packages are used? So I actually reached out to the Dynamo team, and at the time, the people who were giving workshops on tools to help make this happen. It was Russell and Mike Kirshner on the Dynamo team. And I was like, is there any way for a Dynamo graph to tell you what packages are being used? And keep in mind, this was in 2018. And they're like, no, that's not possible. We have no correlation with packages loaded at this time. Maybe eventually, so you won't be able to do it. And I was all, is there anything I should be looking at, like custom nodes to do this or something, maybe, and building name lookups and all this complicated stuff? And they were like, you should use view extensions. Those are new and we're supporting them in Dynamo 2.0. And I was like, what in the heck is a view extension? And luckily, they just did a workshop in the UK for view extensions for the Dynamo user group there. And they recorded it and they made sample files. So they sent me that and I started messing with it. And within a week or so, I started to get packages that were in use within the Dynamo graph. So that was the first use case. And since I was told it wasn't really possible at the time and it was difficult, I kind of had fun with it and made it to where it was really kind of goofy. So this was the well, not exactly like this, but this was like roughly the screenshot I sent to the Dynamo team during that summers. I was like, "There's your package use," you know. So it was kind of fun. That being said, like what it's doing, that was the first use case of Monocle, and now that's evolved to where you can actually had a user say that they didn't like that popping up all the time every time they use it. So we actually have another version in there that's called the boring mode as well.
Yeah, the boring mode, I saw that. It made me kind of laugh. It's like
yeah, that one was actually from Gavin, the Aussie BIM guru.
Yeah.
He's all, a lot of my users aren't liking the meme, and I'm like, that's too bad. And then I added the other version.
Yeah, for serious people.
Yeah, for people who want to be super serious, right?
Yeah, I prefer the real mode, the OG
yeah, there you
one.
go. See, there we go. The other one actually gives you a few more features because it does the node counts. But yeah, this menu right here was really fun for AU 2019, I think. All the computers in the lab had this up on the screen because Carl, I think of all people, was doing a lab showing people how to use it, and this was on every screen, and I was like, that's awesome.
And yeah, something I definitely use it is that you can place a little text above each node that says from which package. Can you show that?
Yeah, so if you hit annotate custom nodes, so to pop up that window really quickly too, I did Control Shift P on my keyboard. So if I were to do clear, it'll delete them. But if I do annotate, it'll actually go through, and as a consultant, this is how we've been annotating nodes for a while. It'll go through and place a note right above every node with the version number. The version number is important because as a consultant, I'm telling people this workflow uses this version of this package and it will work given those constraints. So that's kind of where that came from too. What's really cool is the newer versions of Dynamo, you can pin this note. So I'm hoping to add that eventually as well.
If you move it.
Exactly. So if you move it, because right now if I move it, like, that's awesome. Right now I have all kinds of mess, but that's where you can just hit the button again and it'll update the note. So keep that in mind too. I'm trying not to dirty your Dynamo graphs if I can help it, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I use it all the time because it's even for myself. Sometimes I forget which custom nodes I use, so it's a good reminder.
For sure. And just even if you open it and get an idea of like, what all did I use in this graph without annotating it, you could really quickly see like a whole list of stuff. So like if I were to add another node, it'll actually update, and now I know I'm using 2 packages. So it's really fun.
All right, and
that's kind of where that was born.
And there are some other stuff in the Monocle as well. There's the Dropdown converter. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so let's actually jump into this. I have several Revit versions open as well. So one thing as a consultant, so all these tools too, they're primarily born out of necessity as a consultant. So Aaron, Melissa, Lauren, all of us, we work in Dynamo quite a bit. And we encounter a lot of frustrations with Dynamo. I love Dynamo, but sometimes some things frustrate us, right? Yeah. So we'll actually build tools to resolve that, and we share those with the community in the way of Monocle. So a lot of these were internal before they ever saw the light of day as well. For the Dropdown converter, I'm not sure if everyone realizes, if you use a Dropdown like a categories node, and I tie it to walls, and I open this in a different Revit file or a different version of Revit, it might change what it has selected. To like, I've had it move considerably to where all of a sudden it's on vibration management, I don't know. And I had a graph that was collecting walls and setting parameters, you know?
Vibration.
To put it bluntly, that sucks. Yeah, that sucks that the category can change on you. So the solution a lot of the time is to place a category by name node, name the category, and connect it. That takes time. Categories drop down way faster, and we like to use that. So the drop-down converter in newer versions of Monocle is now in this little tool chest. It's this little recycle icon. If you hit that, it'll actually place a category by name node for you. So that's kind of fun. I actually rename it just to tell you it converted. We used to delete the original node, but errors can happen in Dynamo because it's like in a weird state to where it doesn't know that you want to delete a node and place a node. So I just leave it. What's cool about this is if I connect this, I'll remove this one and we convert it once again. It will connect it for me though. So as you're cleaning up your Dynamo graph, you can start to work through it and remove those nodes. If you have categories to where you want someone to change it for a Dynamo graph, like in Dynamo Player, and you mark it as input, leave the categories node. But in the event that you're hard coding it, you should probably always use a category by name for the most part. So that's kind of where that one's from.
Yeah, pretty useful as well. I've used it a few times, and yeah, that's actually on client recently
the
asked
other
me
thing,
what's going on with all these categories. That's they all mess up when I update Dynamo with a new version.
exactly. So that was, like I said, that was born out of frustration. We upgraded a bunch of Dynamo graphs to a new Revit version because we have Dynamo graphs for our template and for clients, and all of those categories changed, and like we were ticked because we were like, all of our graphs are broken right now. And then I reached out on GitHub for Dynamo and I was like, what's the deal with this? And they're like, oh, it just saves which number in the list it is. And it picks that same number later. I'm like, that's awful. Like, I wish I knew that years ago, So that's why we made that. Additionally, it will work for other drop-down types, so like element types. There is no element type by name out of the box. So the code for that's really complicated. So if you do that, it'll actually do all that complicated code for you as well. So if you were to hard code to wall for the Revit database type, it'll actually type that in because I can't remember that. I don't know if everyone else can, but
can element types get broken like categories as well?
Yes, because any drop down, and they fixed this in newer versions of Dynamo, so I want to give the team some credit, of course. But any drop down, it was storing the integer, the index that the element appeared at. So not great if you're relying on that to always be wall,
All right.
And it'll also work for a few other drop downs too, so give it a try and see. And you can add feature requests if you have another one that you want.
All right. So that was Monocle. Good job for that. Thanks for sharing that with the community. We got a pretty good question from someone in the chat. Curious to know, what have you tried to build and fail or was not possible? Any things that comes to mind?
There's a current one that's on the Autodesk forum. It was for, and it kind of doesn't make sense for it to be possible, but it kind of does. It's the person was wanting to make ceiling hosted family types or something. It's not possible necessarily. So
because of the API.
Yeah, so we are limited by the Revit API a lot of the time. So that was one of the things that came up, and gosh, I wish I remembered that. That is a really good question. One that came up and it wasn't solvable for a long time was extracting ceiling grids from elements. So that one is possible with the package called Sparrow, but the other one, I can't remember what it was right now. We encounter it quite a bit when there are limitations within it. So a big one, and probably everyone has this complaint, is working with BIM 360 files.
Yeah.
So we sell tools at Parallax that link details and things like that. We always will have people wanting to work with BIM 360 files, which is somewhat possible in the API, but it requires things like Forge and cloud services and things like that. So like, it's not directly possible without costing cloud credits or whatever. So that's one that like we encounter quite a bit these days, and I hope they start to open it up more to where it's easier to deal with the cloud files. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't
even
know what's
Dynamo
going
has
on.
a hard time on that.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with BIM 360. There's all these. Everything looks very similar, but there's a few subtle changes that kind of mess up your workflows every once in a while.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so crazy. So like the workaround that we have is people link in files while they're on BIM 360. And if they want to pull assets from that file, as long as it's a link, it works without Forge. So kind of a freebie there is like work with link files and just unload the link when you don't need it. But that's kind of the lazy method, I guess.
All right. So next on the menu, I wanted to know about the new versions of Revit. You've been exploring that.
New versions of Dynamo, yeah.
Yeah, of Dynamo. Yeah, sorry, not Revit.
Don't want to get in trouble. No, I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, so new versions of Dynamo. So as a package author, and I make view extensions. That's what Monocle is. This is an add-on to Dynamo. I generally investigate the new versions as they are getting deployed on dynamobuilds.com. So with that being said, now we have another question that's good, so I'll answer that. I test those versions. So this right here, we'll make a simple graph. This is Dynamo 2.13. That's out on dynamobuilds.com right now for testing. It's not in Revit yet, and that's because Revit ships Dynamo with point releases now. But if you want to test it, you come here and you can download the latest stable one or the latest build altogether. In this case, this is kind of how it looks now. New menu, new nodes, new library, things like that. What's really great is we'll just do a number slider. Connect this. I was testing this yesterday because I'm testing all this functionality. So Monocle, I'll show Monocle off at the same time. As a package author, I have to test these because as things change, I don't want users of Monocle to get frustrated with it either. And these nodes being different is pretty considerable in the case of Monocle. But in Monocle, we're able to create groups really quickly with the little in canvas thing. The name of that's actually Foca, and I'll include a link as to why. I guess I could show it real quick. So generally speaking, this is Dynamo, right? This is a real detergent bottle. I saw it built Australia. And this is Foca. That's also a laundry detergent, but this is Foca as well. So, kind of a random thing. That's what this little in-canvas thing's called. But in Dynamo 2.13, they've added a lot of cool functionality for groups. So like as you can see, there's a header now, and then there's a description, and all sorts of cool stuff. If I were to drag this node onto there, it will add it to the group. If I were to have a node that has an input and an output, we'll drag it on there. We'll actually replace this. I'm really hoping this is like a beta version that I'm testing, so that's on the daily builds. If we plug this in, you can collapse the group now and start to have inputs and outputs and all sorts of cool stuff. So the new version is really exciting. I've been testing it quite a bit. In addition, if you go to extensions, graph properties, the Dynamo graphs now support descriptions within them since 2.12, which is on Revit 22. So you can actually add a description for your Dynamo graph, put an image, an author name, maybe other properties, like what else you need to depend on for this.
A GIF?
And start to have that embedded. Yeah, you can actually embed
Can you?
some of that in there, not for the image, but for like the learn more you can. I tried it. Surprising, right? But yeah, so you can start to, in Dynamo 2.12 and Revit 22, start adding descriptions to your graphs as well. It's really neat, and generative design uses these as well to show the properties inside of the window. So I would strongly suggest people start investigating this new version in the core if they can. In addition to that, other things that they've added that have improved is this autocomplete. So if you double click on an input port or an output port, you can start to have autocomplete. So in the case of like a new user, if they don't know what goes into a point by coordinates node, they can double click now and get a little bit of a suggestion now, which is really cool. This is also in 2.12, but it's so much nicer in 2.13. And if I output here, I might want to make a circle. What else might I want to make, But yeah, that's another really cool feature that they've refined even more in 2.13. Other things, new preferences menus. So you're able to change your run setting here globally. You're able to turn on the auto completer off. What else is there? They have the package manager located here, so this is a really cool hint as to how they're starting to show you how you can manage these, I think. Apparently Rhythm doesn't load in 2.13, so that's fun. What else is in here? I think they've improved the search some, which is really nice. Yeah, a lot of little different things in there. So I encourage people to go kick the tires on it a bit. It is still an early release, so you might find a few bugs here and there and just report them.
And what's up with the black nodes?
It's the new look. Yeah,
All right.
I don't think you can get back the old look actually. Which is kind of interesting. I don't know. That might be met with like people having mixed feelings about it, but yeah, it's the new look. It's completely different, right?
Yeah, it's the dark Dynamo.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting for sure. Yeah, and in Monocle actually, in both versions of Dynamo, we can actually start to highlight custom nodes in the menu. So if you go to custom node highlighting, you can actually enable highlighting. So that's actually included in 2.13 as well. So it's kind of fun. That's largely why I've been looking at the new version, is to make sure my stuff's compatible.
And do you know when that version would be released? Probably with the next version of Revit.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. For instance, the version in 22 right now, if we go to Dynamo about, is 2.12. So whenever whatever point release I'm in of Revit came out, I don't even know what point release, 22.1. That was the latest stable build. So, I mean, just judging by that, it's kind of up to the people who build Revit to decide when they ship the newest Dynamo build out as well. That being said, 2.13 is here at the top of the list, so I mean, it could be soon. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, looking forward to it.
I saw another question in there.
Yeah,
Someone
from
asked
Dave,
what the little
asking about the 3D cereal box sunglasses. Is that
for
from
sure.
Monocle?
So Monocle also has that, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm working in generative design a lot these days. If you don't know, in generative design, if you create a study and build something, you're able to explore the results in a little viewer window. So in this viewer, if we come in here, this is the 3D view that we get of things. And you can zoom in and out and all that kind of stuff. What's difficult with that is in out of the box Dynamo, I have no way of like making a plan view. So I have to come in here and kind of get it as close as I can, and it's still perspective, so I can't do anything about that. But that's pretty close, right? So that's what I would give a user, for instance. In Monocle, we actually have the ability to have, we call it standard views. If you click on these views, it'll actually orient the background 3D preview to top, right, left, front, back, bottom. So you can get all these different views available to you in Dynamo now. So that's something that, like, I wish it were out of the box. I don't know why it isn't, but we have it in Monocle for you, and it's those little 3D glasses. And the reason those 3D glasses are right here now is because in 2.13, which I was just showing, they actually moved this menu up here into this toolbar. And this is where all my little icons were, but now they were clashing, so I had to move it somewhere else, so I did. Another one of those things, testing the new version, something I found out.
And ScoreDX in the chat asks if you can show us the Clippy.
The Clippy. Yeah, so that's an old version of Monocle. There used to be a Clippy tool in here to where you could click on Clippy and he'd pop up. I'll include a link for it. There's a video on it. But he could pop up, and as you select nodes in the workspace, it tells you this is a custom node. This comes from Rhythm. This is out of the box. I actually removed that because the way it was looking up custom packages was very resource heavy. So it wasn't like a tool that I was thrilled to have bundled with something that people are using.
Yeah.
The code's up there on GitHub if you ever want to implement Clippy in your own application, though.
Great.
Kind of funny.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. I don't know if you have time to show us what you've been doing with room tags.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I can show that real quick. And then yeah, anyone can kind of drop off or ask more questions. So dictionaries are kind of like what the topic of that room tag was. So that room tag post. So a question came up on the forums, and if you're not on the Dynamo forums, you should be. There's a lot of cool people there to ask questions and help and things like that. One question was, oh, you said room tags. I'm going off on the wall tag. Room tags, I could show that.
All right.
Wow, I totally got sidetracked. So let's open. I'll show the room tags. And the room tags are actually a post that's on the Dynamo blog. And what we'll do is we'll select all. And we'll put another one. So what we're actually doing in this case is we're rubber banding room tags to the center of the room. So it is a generative design script that's available to you for free on the Dynamo blog post that's supposed to go live. The video's on YouTube, on the Dynamo YouTube already. But what it does is it uses a package called Dynashape to magnetize the room tag to the center of the room. It does all this while, and I'll turn on furniture, while keeping in mind it doesn't want to clash with things like wall tags, things like furniture, and things like that. So if I were to make this a little harder for the solver here, you open, this is generative design right now, you would select the rooms you want to tag, because tag all, so if we were to do, I don't know if I have to show everyone, but I guess I can. If we were to do tag all rooms right now, it's going to result in like a less than perfect result, right? I think we all agree. Overlapping is not the funnest thing. In the case of this graph, if I select the tag to use, so this would be my tag type I want to place. We'll only do a few. We can generate options as a solver. So generative design is a program for Revit that runs Dynamo in the background for you to solve for things. In this case, it's launching 4 Dynamo instances, generating a lot of different outcomes for me to filter and choose from. So it's pretty quick. It should go pretty quick. If not, I can open an already done one. But yeah, let's see. So this is kind of what generative design looks like, right? And once again, this video is on the Dynamo YouTube already.
Yeah, I haven't.
And so what it's doing... Oh, go ahead.
I'll be honest, I haven't got to try much of generative design. A little bit when it came out. I haven't got to use it much yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I am. And a lot of the examples get criticized because they're for massing and things like that, which is a great use case. But a lot of times when I come and look at things, I look at more practical examples. So we have a post for laying out viewports on a sheet. We have a post now for room tags, and we're working on a few others. What's always cool is when we start to do some of these practical things that are kind of like not the funnest things to do day to day, right? So what we have is, this window's a little small, but we have options presented to us. So this cafeteria tag overlaps that table slightly. This prep/dish slightly hits that wall tag, but the rest are green. You can filter these down too in this bottom corner. But let's say I like that one. So in generative design, if I hit create Revit elements, it'll actually go through and use that solution that I made to place tags based on that criteria. So I'm letting Dynamo and generative design do all the heavy lifting for me, and then I can kind of QA it after the fact. And you can pick as many rooms as you want for this use case. So yeah, that one's pretty good. It barely overlaps. That one does not overlap. That one doesn't. And all of these look good. So that's kind of how that one works. And once again, it's using a package called Dynashape, which simulates physics in Dynamo, to try to rubber band it to the center of the room. And as it clashes things, it'll actually bounce around. So it'll like bounce off that table. And then so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
You have like all that complex calculations for a tag.
Yeah, I put all
works.
that effort into yeah, that workflow, I was like super obsessed with it too, and it was all for room tags, but it uses Dynashape and a package called VASA to do that, which are 3D packages that do crazy stuff. This is VASA right here. It makes voxel models to do all sorts of crazy stuff, and in this case, it's doing 3D pathfinding. So start point, end point, and there's your route, your path of travel to that point. And I use that for room tags, so there you go. How exciting, right?
All right, so the show will slowly come to an end. There's a couple more of questions. Apparently, we have a few Dynamo beginners in the house. The Lunatic asks, is Dynamo a separate install? Is Dynamo Studio necessary? It used to be a separate installation. I think since a couple of versions, it's now built in Revit, or at least
Yeah.
installed um, with, at the same time of Revit.
Yeah, I think since Revit 20, Dynamo's included in Revit. It's bundled with Civil 3D as well. Alias has a build bundled in and things like that. Dynamo Sandbox is its alternative version that's free to use that you can download standalone. So yeah, it's not a separate install. Dynamo Studio, I don't even see that in my little Autodesk portal thing that helps you update apps anymore. So I don't know. So that's I wouldn't even worry about that one. I'm generally a Revit user of Dynamo primarily. I use Sandbox too to build stuff like Monocle.
Yeah, I saw with at an episode about Formit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And you can use Dynamo with Formit as well. That
Yeah,
was a pretty
Performant
interesting. I
is
didn't know
huge. Yeah, because like Formit's like the better version of another 3D modeler, right? That people like. But with Dynamo, it's even better because now you can start to build some of that logic in, which is really sweet. Dynamo, Zach Cron says it the best from the Dynamo team. It's like the Vibram of the AEC industry, the rubber for shoes, because it's connecting everything, is what he says.
Yeah, interesting. So what are your favorite resources for beginners to learn? Or I think you have some courses of your own.
Yeah, so I have a few courses of my own. I have my blog that I post stuff on. I'm working on a few other things that I'll share as they're ready, as well regarding Dynamo and beginner users. The course that I offer now, that I have now, is rather old. I think it's on like Dynamo 1.3, so it desperately needs updated. So keep an eye out for that. I'll post updates on all the social media and my blog and all that when that's available. Other than that, I say forums. The Dynamo forum's huge. Revit forum's huge. Conferences are a big deal for meeting Dynamo users and talking about things. When they're virtual, it's a little harder. I think we met at AU for the first time, you know?
Yeah, I think it was at Build. I didn't go to a
Oh, was it Built? So it
that
was
year, but yeah, it's the
so
last
we met
real
at Built for
conference
the
I
first
went to.
time. Ah, yeah. So it was, yeah, we met you at Built, and being able to collaborate with people in that way is huge. So I'd say find local user groups, the online forums, make friends in this space. A lot of my really good friends I met through all of this, which is really cool. And I always like to share a quote as well that I share like in all my presentations. And people ask me a lot of the time, why do you share like the code for Rhythm and share all this stuff? And it's honestly because like I really believe that the more generous you get, the larger your world gets.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
that's one thing that I always try to reiterate to people is, as you're within this community, sharing is huge because your world will just get a whole lot larger. And if you're stingy, it might get smaller. So that's something that I very much believe in. So if there's one thing non-Dynamo related you take from this, I would hope that that's it.
Yeah, I agree. The more you share, the more you help solve other people problem. I think it helps you as well in the indirect ways.
For sure.
All right, so I think we went through most of the questions. Anything else you wanted to mention or shout out before we move on?
I mean, other than that, just feel free to reach out. I'm always on the forums. You'll include links in the notes, I assume, and I
Yep.
appreciate you having me on. This has been really fun. So it's been
Yeah,
nice to check in and
I agree.
talk to everyone.
Yeah, great question, great session as usual, and yeah, thank you so much for your packages. We didn't get to bang, so perhaps on the upcoming session at some point. And quickly, I wanted to mention that learn at revitpure.com if you want to get started with Dynamo. Actually, you can use the manage learning package, which is not just about Dynamo. It's for BIM managers, but the final chapter is about Dynamo. And actually, if you go on YouTube, you can find a part of this course to create your first scripts. And which uses some rhythm nodes. And I actually teach the out of the box way, and then with rhythm as well.
That's awesome.
All right. Yeah. So quickly, next week on Wednesday at 3 p.m. with Fabio Roberti and Decio Ferreira about increasing productivity in Power BI. Don't miss that episode. So thank you very much, John. That was amazing. Always great to hear from you and see what you've been up to. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
thanks to everybody, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.